The Geekorama podcast is brought to you by superherofiction.com, the one-stop shop for novels featuring the superpowered heroes we all love. Your hosts are
Trish Heinrich, author of the Vigilante Superhero Universe.
And I'm Jeremy Flagg, author of the Children of Notre Dame's universe. So, how's it going?
It's good. Your mic is super hot right now.
Oh, is it?
It's really loud, yeah. There we go. Like, you were blowing it out, it sounded like. And then now you're like normal. Well, like, not blowing it out in any way.
Yeah, we'll just keep our distance from the mic.
We're gonna go with it. It's that kind of day.
So how's it going on your end?
It's going. I'm doing a lot of work on Fire and Ice. I'm getting a lot of words done. Did over 3,000 words Monday and Tuesday of new stuff. And it's funny because I tell people I'm revising it, but it really does feel like I'm just rewriting it from top to bottom at this point because there's so much stuff I need to put up front for it to make sense that I'm just rewriting the whole thing at this point. Like,
for those who are watching,
it's all red. He's holding up a piece of paper from his manuscript, and there's lots of red ink. Like,
I am going to have to invest in more red pens by the end of this.
Nothing wrong with more pens. I love pens. But, I mean, I'm making progress, so that feels really good to me. I'm making good progress.
I'm kind of in the same exact boat as you. I have 3 books that are ready to go. I just need to edit them and then get them out there. But at the same time, I'm trying not to lose my word count. So what I've been noticing is after dinner, I go in the hot tub and there's no good TV to watch. So I'm just like, well, I'll just go write. So today was the first day of trying this, editing during the day, and then I'm going to write at night.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to drop I'm still doing way more words than normal, but I'm going to trying to shoot for like 3,000, but I'm going to let myself, if I get 1,500, we're going to call it victory.
Yeah.
Because editing it's
a slog.
It's the only way to describe it. And
yeah.
And what I've edited so far is actually a pretty clean edit. I mean, it's a lot of red pen, but it's simple things. Like I'm focused on like commas and word choices and why did I write the word door 3 times in this sentence? Or hall. I really like the word hall. But when I get into the rest of it, I do know that there's going to be, I have another 10,000 words to play with. So there's definitely a little bit of a little subplot that I want to weave back in. So that's where eventually words will come from.
Yeah.
Yay.
The process of writing a book.
So yeah, I that's what I'm doing. Do you want to get us started on pop culture history?
Yes. And because it's June, I thought I would do a summer blockbuster edition.
Okay.
So the summer blockbuster is something that really began in 1975 with the movie Jaws. Jaws is widely considered the first real true blockbuster. And it was released in June in 1975. And I love Jaws for so many reasons, but one of the main reasons is because that entire shoot was a clusterfuck. People were sick. They had food poisoning. The guy that was the boat captain showed up drunk all the time. The mechanical shark would not work. It wouldn't work. So all they had was like a guy in a suit with a fin on his back being dragged around in a boat. So you have the fin in the water. That was all they had. That's all they could show. And it's brilliant because the entire film, you're scared of this monster that you can't see. You see the fin, you hear the music, and oh my God, somebody's going to get eaten. But you don't see the damn shark until the very end. And then when you see it, you're like, holy shit. And that's because they couldn't get it to work.
Well, and think of all the movies that have come from that, like Cloverfield.
Mm-hmm.
You're scared of something you don't see for
Yeah.
80% of that movie. And then when you see it, you're like, ugh.
Whereas the shark was like horrifying. It's this huge ass thing, right? So I love that movie. It's ridiculous in so many ways, but
I
it
have to
is.
admit, I have never seen it as an adult.
Oh, you should watch it. It's ridiculous.
And I'm not 100% sure that I ever saw it younger through the whole thing. I will admit, as an adult, because I love bad movies, I have watched all the sequels, and wow.
Oh, yeah, no,
Ooh,
that's rough, man. No,
not
the original is not that bad. So I recommend it if anybody wants to kick off their summer blockbuster watching at home, find Jaws. Next up in 1981. So we're going to be focusing a little bit on the 80s this episode and probably the next episode, because the 80s is honestly almost like the renaissance of summer blockbuster films. And you're going to learn why in just a moment. So in 1981, Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark premiered. It is the 5th highest grossing film of the decade and the highest grossing film of 1981. And I do want to back up really quick. The 1980s began, and this wasn't released in June, but it was released in May. But the 1980s, in terms of blockbuster films, began with Empire Strikes Back. Mm-hmm. So that gives you kind of an idea of what we're dealing with. And then a year later is Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark. And it's, like I said, the 5th highest grossing film of the decade. So the entire 1980s, and the highest grossing film of 1981. And it was still a disappointment, box office speaking, for Warner Brothers. They wanted it to make more. I'm like, wow.
And we get a franchise.
Exactly. In 1982, E.T. is released. And to this day, it holds the record for the most weekends spent at number 1 in the box office, which is 16 weekends at number 1.
Wow.
It is also the top grossing film of the entire decade. So that means it beat Empire. It grossed $435 million.
So I never liked E.T., and I'm probably the only person in the world. It weirded me out, mostly because I was born in 81. So I remember it sat in, so we lived with my grandmother at the time, and there was a VHS in the cupboard, and it was still in cellophane, and it sat there for like all year. And I didn't know if it was like a Christmas present that was just left in an obvious location. And my, I must have been like 4 or 5 at the time, and like no one would let me watch it. And finally I saw it later, and it made me so uncomfortable. Which also reminds me that Drew Barrymore is only like 2 years older than me.
Oh, she's itty bitty thing. Well, and I was born in 1977. So when it came out, my parents thought, this is a great movie. Let's take the kids to the drive-in to see E.T. I freaked the fuck out. I screamed my head off in that first scene, because the drive-in that we went to was surrounded by a field of tall grass. Now tell me, seriously, what's there not to be afraid of when you're watching this mysterious being running through fucking tall grass and you're 5 years old? I was terrified. And
you have to remember, like, back then, like, that stuff looked real.
It did. Well, like, it was animatronic. It was a really good animatronic.
Which might have been what made me uncomfortable about it, because it just, the scene where everyone else is like, it's so cute when he's in all the stuffed animals. I'm like, no, I'm not going with stuffed animals anymore.
Like, you people are crazy.
I took them out of my room. I remember removing them from my room because of that movie.
Oh my God. Well, we have one more. Hopefully, not as scarring for any of us. Um, in 1989, Batman, starring Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, premiered. It is the fourth highest-grossing film of the decade of the 1980s. A little fun thing, really quickly, about Batman: actors who were considered for the role of Batman include Mel Gibson, Kevin Costner, Tom Selleck, Bill Murray, Harrison Ford, and Dennis Quaid. For the Joker, actors who were considered include Tim Curry, David Bowie, John Lithgow, Ray Liotta, and James Woods.
Ray Liotta.
Robin Williams is reported to have lobbied very hard for the part of the Joker.
For Joker, I would have been okay with Tim Curry or John Lithgow.
Agreed. David Bowie is a fascinating choice. That would have been a completely different movie.
And I think if the role had been written knowing David Bowie would be it, then I would be okay with David Bowie.
Yeah.
Though I do have to admit, I kind of want Tom Selleck as Batman, but he has to keep the mustache.
Ew. No. Ew. Ew. Well, Bill Murray. Who thought Bill Murray? I mean, I love you, Bill, but you're not Batman.
I mean,
how is that a serious consideration?
Also, Dennis Quaid for me
he was hot at the time. I mean, he was,
like Harrison Ford makes the most sense for me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Though again, the mustache, just the bat suit, it would be like Henry Cavill with his digitally removed mustache.
That was okay. Seriously, Warner got punked. There was no reason for him to keep that mustache, even for pickups of that stupid Mission Impossible film. Warner got punked. Like, just.
I mean, that mustache will go down in history.
Oh, yeah. Maybe the Snyder Cut will fix it. I can't even say that with a straight face. That's how ridiculous it is.
I want the Snyder Cut to be nothing but mustaches.
Yeah, the Snyder Cut puts the mustache back.
And that's it. That's it.
Brilliant.
$1 million, and all we get is a mustache out.
All we get is the mustache. Because, I mean, yeah, no, that's perfect.
I want the mustache to have a starring role.
Its own line, its own byline. You're like, also starring the mustache.
You know what? I would pay money to see it again.
This is what you get, folks. This is what you get. We're punchy today. Hope you don't mind.
Okay.
I mean, that's the end of pop culture, the first part of our summer blockbuster edition.
So because I just thought of this and this makes me excited.
Okay.
On, was it Saturday? Must have been Saturday. I watched the SpaceX launch.
Oh, did you? I did not get to see that.
So it was the most uneventful but cool thing all at the same time.
Yeah.
It was kind of broadcasted like sports. So in the way that when the quarterbacks are meeting or they're going to the dugout, or like those weird downtimes, they're like, let's cut it to this random person who's going to tell you useless information.
Okay.
At least for technology, I like that useless information.
Yeah.
The funny thing about it was, so the two guys who went up, Bob and Doug, who are now my role models because it's Bob and Doug, not Captain Bob, not Commander Doug, Bob and Doug. Which was the funniest piece of the whole thing. It's just because they're like, oh, let's go back to Bob and Doug. They're about to leave the planet. Like, give them a cool title.
It sounds like you're talking about the two dudes down at the end of the bar that are like drinking beer.
Like Bob and Doug are just going to walk in and be like, yo. But so we started watching about 45 minutes before it launched. And of course, it's all like B-roll and all this other stuff. But what was funny about it was if you went to the control room, it's a bunch of older people, I'm going to say 40s and up, sitting around, and everyone has like triple monitors and their keyboard.
Okay.
And you go back and you look at like old space launches, and there would be like 100 people in the room, those rows of computers. But now it's like NASA developed open office technology. And they're all like chatting as they're like checking liquid oxygen levels
and playing Animal Crossing at the same time, probably.
And it was also funny because they're all wearing masks, and I'm sure it was that they were socially distanced. I mean, they were actually distanced.
That's awesome.
But then it would go like, okay, now we're going to go back to, Cassandra, who is going to do whatever. And all of a sudden it would go back to their social media people who were all 20. Bravo, NASA. You knew what you were doing. But it was kind of funny that the adults are in the big room and all the kids are in the playroom.
Yeah.
Except the kids in the playroom are live commenting on everything else.
Yeah.
So that was cool. The rocket goes off, and I was cooking dinner at the time, and I had some friends over and we were watching it. And as like they have a window like up to 15 seconds before where they can cancel it, and then there's 2 minutes that they can cancel it once it's already launched, and then 8 minutes after deployment. And so like as it gets near that time, like you really still stiffen up and you're like, and it goes and people start cheering, you're like, there's still big fire, like, are you sure? Because I don't want to.
Yeah.
And then the best thing was Bob and Doug have I think a Brontosaurus Beanie Baby.
What?
But it's
That's
all
awesome.
like, it's all glittery and like sequins. And when they got up to space, it came out of nowhere, which I don't know where it was because they have like all brand new suits, which was really cool and very like sci-fi. And all of a sudden you just see this dinosaur floating across.
That's brilliant.
And now this morning that Beanie Baby is going for $235 on eBay.
Of course.
So
of course.
Welcome capitalism. So that was the thing I geeked out about. And then of course it took 19 hours, I believe, for them to dock with the ISS. And when they were docking, there was like all like the tension was back again, and will it work, will it won't, and everything went flawlessly. Like there was literally no troubles to be had. So that was
all good news.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Bob and Doug.
But we'll hear back from Bob and Doug and Beanie Baby very soon.
And the Beanie Baby is on the station. It has been already seen.
Love it.
But yeah, it was fascinating because, while it was going on, we were looking up, like, what do they actually do on the space station?
They're doing experiments they're doing several different kinds of experiments. One of them for, like, actually living in space, right?
Yeah,
that's part of it.
The ultimate goal of the space program right now is to study low gravity, which this also I did not know. There's gravity on the space station.
What?
So it's called microgravity. And when a plane goes up really high and the plane falls, that moment when the plane falls, there's no gravity.
Yeah.
And that's what the space station is doing over and over and over again. It's constantly falling. And that's what's creating low gravity. They're not actually in space. Who knew?
I did not know that.
And so they're studying like bone density and isolation and all that stuff. But the other thing I didn't know is they work full-time jobs up there because they're doing experiments on cancer scannings and agricultural stuff. And,
wow.
And they're not scientists. They're just Bob and Doug. But all day long, they have scientists being like, okay, now you need to do this, and now you need to do this, and now you need to do this.
Oh, wow.
So they are, the hand of scientists that are making
Doing
them
these
work.
experiments. Oh my God. How interesting.
So
Wow.
they work up to 16 hours every day.
Jeez. So they're not just floating around up there having parties and drinking, Tang.
I just had a guess that it was kind of like the opening of Alien before Alien showed up. Like, okay, we're just gonna have a meal and drink and smoke on a space station because that seems logical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that was my geek out.
I love it.
Way
I love it.
geekier than I thought.
It's a good geek out. It's an excellent geek out. Mine is not quite geeky, but it is pretty awesome. So I wrote down her name because I'm terrible with names. Hannah Gadsby. She did Nanette, which was a Netflix comedy special that really made a lot of people uncomfortable because she talked about her trauma as a woman and what she had gone through as a lesbian, and it's well worth a watch. If you haven't seen Nanette, look it up. But anyway, Hannah Gadsby has a new comedy special on Netflix called Douglas, and it is frigging hilarious. Douglas is the name of her dog. And she, I don't even know how to describe this comedy special, except that it's just it's not all over the place. It's very ordered and logical. And up front, she tells you, she's like, well, if you're here because of Nanette, I'm very sorry to let you know that I don't have any more trauma to unpack. If I had known that trauma was going to be big business, I would have saved some. I wouldn't have put all my trauma eggs in one special. I would have spread them out. But she's like, I have no new trauma for you, so I'm very sorry. So then she proceeds for the next 10 minutes to tell you. She lays out the entire comedy special. I'm going to talk about this, and this is what's going to be like. And if I'm talking about you, don't invest. Just listen. Just don't invest. Don't get offended. And then she's like, and then I'm going to talk about this. And then I'm going to have this kind of joke. I mean, she lays the whole thing out for you. And she's like, the best part about me doing this, you're not going to remember any of it until I've actually done it. Yeah. And she mentions a Louis C.K. joke at the beginning. She's like, it's going to be at the end. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. And we did. We forgot about the Louis C.K. joke till she said it. I was like, oh my God.
Can you do callbacks in your own comedy special?
She's brilliant. She, Nanette really was groundbreaking. It was something completely different. She had comedy with it, but really, I mean, what she said about it was, how else am I supposed to get people to listen to this? She's like, and then she says, white men, let's be honest. And she's like, if I don't tell you, it's going to be entertaining. She's like, that's the biggest joke of all. That's classic, man. I made you think it was a comedy special, and then I lectured you. It's fantastic. So her new special, Douglas, it's brilliant. And she goes on several different talks about men and their entitlement and how they named everything because they just could. And she's like, my favorite bit is her talking about balls. Sorry, everybody. This is going to be a little bit of an explicit episode. She's like, a man named those because there's nothing about them that says sporting events or, muscular men running around a field. She's like, if a woman named that, it would be like Karen's handful. It would just be like that. So the whole night when she shows and she goes through classic art and she dissects it, she's like, a man did this because, and she just goes through and she just highlights all this stuff. So every time there's a woman with their hand in a certain position, she's like, look, Karen's handful. There it is. It's just hilarious. And she talks about having an autism diagnosis as an adult. And she even takes on anti-vaxxers, which is just the best part of the whole thing, because she's like, only half of you laughed. Okay, look, let me give you a tip. If you're an anti-vaxxer and you've been laughing this whole time, but now this isn't funny, just go like this and people won't be able to tell that you're uncomfortable. I was dying. It was the perfect thing to watch last night. So look it up. It's on Netflix. It's called Douglas. It's Hannah Gadsby. It's brilliant. She's wonderful.
So we're ready for the deep dive?
I think we're ready for the deep dive. Okay. Why don't you introduce the deep dive?
So we are going to do a couple episodes that revolve around what makes a good. So obviously the easy one for us to start is we're going to talk about what makes a good superhero. And 100% this is going to be subjective, and this is going to be us speaking both as a consumer and as a producer. So we'll try and make sure that that's clear, because weirdly enough, I don't really consume. No, I consume what I make. So
you consume it far more than I do. Well, I consume prose, you consume comics.
Yeah, I consume like related genre film, but not necessarily superhero.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about what makes a good superhero, and we're going to kind of frame it in the context of what makes them stand out, what makes them unique, and why do people watch them. So if you're a fan of superheroes in general, definitely agree, disagree. Like, we're all game for arguing here. And if you're a writer, this is going to be some of our perspective. And we just had the superhero fiction panels where we talk about some of this as well. So if you want to get more in depth, go check those out. But yeah, let's talk about what makes a good superhero, like the hero that we want to read, we want to come back to.
I was giving this some thought today. What in terms of like, okay, but what do I like? What do I like in a superhero? I was kind of thinking of it in those terms. And one of the things that came to me was I like a hero with flaws. I like a hero that screws up, or that has a character flaw that trips them up. And they have to like work through that, or they have to like fix what they screwed up, or just live with it. Like I really like that, which is might be why I don't really care about superhero or Superman stories at this point. I'm like, it's okay, but he's so perfect and it drives me crazy.
So we have a little list that we keep, and there's definitely one on here that speaks to that. But why would Wonder Woman make it onto your list with that being something that you're really into? Because in my head, she seems almost a little bit too flawless.
Yeah, so that is a really good point. And I think while I, for the most part, really love a hero like that, there are some that are really, from an emotional standpoint, they hold a special place. And I think Wonder Woman is one of those. Although there was a great, so I forget exactly what it was, but it was this, it was a Justice League comic, and they made a little animated movie about it. But basically, it was Wonder Woman, and it was Justice League, but it was set during like Vietnam or the Korean War, and Wonder Woman was I think it was Vietnam. She was in Vietnam, and she had freed a bunch of women from sexual slavery, and ended up like leading the women on this rampage of like she slaughtered all of these men. And Superman comes up and he's like, what did you do, Diana? This was wrong. And she was like, look, this is what happened to them. They had every right to take vengeance out. And so I think, and there's been other stories that have explored the warrior side of Wonder Woman and how that kind of comes out in her, and maybe like not as much of a compassionate way. And to me, that's a flaw of hers. Like,
I will say, so the only story that I can really speak to is Odyssey, and reading that, I definitely had a sense of, I would turn the page and she would do something, and I would think, that's the Wonder Woman I love right there. Mm-hmm. And it was always, I personally liked it when she got brutal and just decided to beat the ever-living shit out of somebody because they deserved it. And
yeah,
there's always going to be a part of us that go, we're adults, we shouldn't be doing this. But there's a part of you that goes, do it. And when she would do it, you got your little victory moment. But I will agree with you that because she was younger when that stuff was happening, she was still trying to find her way. And I really liked that in the plot, that when she got pushed too far, she did go too far. And some of her story was maintaining a certain level of humanity.
Yeah.
Despite seeing all this injustice, which I thought that was interesting. And even when she stepped over the line, you kind of went, I get it.
Yeah. It's a tough balancing act, I think, for a writer to write that kind of character where it's like they're going to go up to that line and they're going to put a toe across that line, but you're still going to keep them likable and you're going to make the reader really empathetic. Like, I can relate to that even though it's wrong for this to happen.
I think that's the same reason I do like Captain America as far as a character goes, and I know that he has a DC equivalent and all that, but Captain America for me he's military, and if you're not part of the military, you're given orders, and whether you like them or not, you follow those orders. But Captain America doesn't follow the orders all the time.
Yeah.
There are definitely moments in Civil War, he literally goes against, and I mean Civil War, the comic, I guess the movie too.
The movie, yeah.
He goes against orders because it's simply not right. And most military personnel don't have that ability. Like, they go to jail for that.
Yeah.
So I like the fact that what is right and what is wrong, he sees it on a macro level, and then he has to align himself one way or the other personally and make his decisions based off that.
I see that as a flaw too. Like, I think that it's Cap in particular. Like, I love that part of him that you're talking about, but I also see it as kind of a flaw because it does verge very much into the black or white. Things are either right or they're wrong. And there doesn't leave a lot of room for gray. So I think that other characters around him have to push him and say, this isn't like, you can't categorize it as wrong or right. There are gray areas. And I think Cap has a blind spot there, which I also, like I said, I think it's a flaw.
And what I liked about him in the comic book for Civil War is he decides that the Registration Act is unjust. And him and Tony have an argument, and Captain says, well, this is shades of gray and you've made it black and white. Therefore, I'm going to the white and you are going down a dark path. And he was willing to negotiate, but when the negotiation came off the table, he got turned into something that he wouldn't have otherwise done. So yeah, I do agree. He does need that kick in the butt. And I like that. Willing to go, he basically will always rally for the underdog, and I think that is commendable, and at times it kind of is your flaw.
Yeah.
The one I want to bring up while talking about flaws is Jessica Jones.
Yes.
And I'm going to speak. I have read a handful of her comics, and her comic persona is super gruesome because her backstory is just wretched.
Yeah.
But in the show itself, because I think most people know the show more than they do the comic book.
I do as well, yeah.
She is messed up.
Yeah.
I mean, she is so messed up that when she becomes the hero, we patiently wait for it to screw up. And I like that type of character who doing good is the rarity, not the norm.
Yeah.
Because then you get a victory moment.
Well, but she never, what I like about her as a character, at least in the Netflix series, and I am just going to exclusively talk about the Netflix series because I've only read one Jessica Jones comic. She doesn't verge so far to the extreme like the Punisher. I don't like the Punisher. I really don't. I think there is a limit to the flaws that I can, I guess, like, or there's a limit for me in the flaws that are in the heroes where until they become like unlikable to me. If that makes sense. Jessica Jones never goes as far as the Punisher, but she's not exactly a likable hero either. You know, she doesn't want to be a hero. She doesn't want to embrace that. And when she's forced to, she will, but she does it in such a way that's not necessarily heroic.
I'm going to say that I feel that Punisher is very similar to Jessica Jones in many, many ways for a very different audience. I think for people who have experienced the military, I think that they would see the similar thing in Frank Castle that we're talking about for Jessica Jones.
Interesting. I never thought of it like that.
Because he goes off the rail, except his skill set is way more.
Yeah.
He was trained to be a killer, whereas she, I guess, was made to be a weapon of sorts. But
she doesn't want to, like in the show, Kilgrave makes her a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he violates her in so many different ways. He violates her personhood. He violates her body and her mind. And so she's trying to rebuild all of that while not dealing with any of her trauma. Like, it's really her way to deal with her trauma is to drink it and then go punch some stuff. And that is the one thing that in the show I wish that they had done something about, was her working toward confronting that trauma, because they just kind of let it sit there in her. And I wanted that to be part of her arc, I guess. Maybe that's asking too much. Maybe it would have changed her too much,
but in a way, I liked that they didn't address it in long form. I would definitely like to see it eventually addressed. But for the time span that we had, if she had addressed it, I feel that they would have wrapped her up in a bow.
Yeah, that's true.
And she did slightly evolve.
Oh, she did. When she had to. She was in the third season, which I feel I have very much mixed feelings about the third season, but they pushed her. I mean, she was forced because of everything going on around her, because of what happened with Trish, what happened with her mom the previous season. Like, she was forced to choose how she was going to end up. And she did choose a good path, a healthy path, actually. I felt like. So I think they set her on that path towards dealing with her trauma, but we didn't get to see that.
Yeah, I do feel that if we had fourth, fifth, sixth season, then if they did not address her continuing to heal or taking even minor steps, then I would call it bad writing.
Yeah, if she continued to self-destruct, which she had, some of that really did stop in the third season, and I was like, oh, thank God. Like,
and that's kind of, I think, for the Punisher. And again, I'm not a huge Punisher fan. It just, guns in superheroes for me don't mix. But I definitely see where it's coming from. And you were taught an extreme skill set, and now the only way for it to show is to keep it to that level of extreme. And I do think that my father is ex-Marine Corps. And I definitely think that my father, when he got out of the military, if he saw injustice in the world, he was trained to stop it. And unfortunately, and he did get into some trouble. I mean, he got into fights, and I don't know if I should talk about him going to jail, but it was taken care of in the long run. And he would say, like, he's lucky I didn't kill him, because that's what he was trained to do. And in some of those situations, my dad was very much justified, but the rest of us, you know, even if it got physical, would have just thrown a punch and called it a day. But that's not what they were trained to do. So I do think similar extremism in execution, just very, very different audience.
Yeah, I could see that. They both definitely have bucket loads of trauma and flaws.
The show, I actually really liked the show. The first season I thought was, and I hated him in Daredevil. I absolutely hated him. I wanted that show over. It was done. It was horrible.
I actually liked him in Daredevil. It's the only time I've ever liked the Punisher.
He doesn't punish. He spends an entire episode going to get a big gun and never uses a big gun. Like,
Maybe that's
You
why I
aren't
liked
the Punisher. You're the mediocrer. You didn't punish anybody. Stop spray painting all your clothes. But in the actual Punisher series on Netflix, they took a spin of him dealing with his PTSD, and
wow.
It's triggering. I have a lot of military friends who are like, "Whoa, this is stuff that is heavy for all of us."
Wow.
And the story goes a little off the rails, but you don't care because this character is fully realized and amazing, and weirdly good dude until he punishes people. He punishes.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna segue. For me, my number one hero is always going to come back to the same person, and you'll hear me completely argue myself in the next video. Magneto is my favorite hero.
Okay, so explain why he's a hero, because I'm so curious about this.
So here is the short of it. If you could have killed Hitler as a baby, would you have done it to stop World War II?
That is the most conundrum-X question.
In that gray area of you thinking maybe, you have Magneto. So his entire back plot is he was experimented on in Nazi Germany. He was persecuted for being a Jew. He realized his powers there, and horrible things happened. And he meets Professor X very early on in their retconned history, because he's been retconned so many times. Like, he's only like 24 years old because he's de-aged like 8 times. It's weird. But him and the professor meet, and the professor has the same exact goal as him, is for mutants to take their rightful place. But their execution is extremely different. And Magneto's statement is, they will never understand, so we will make them understand. Whereas Professor X takes it from the point of view of, if we show them we're good, they'll eventually accept us. And not to get political, how's that working out right now?
Yeah. No, that is a really good allegory. Yes.
And so, absolutely. And this is why, if you ever want to hear me go on about X-Men, this is why I love X-Men, because it very much can fit civil rights issues, LGBT things, women's lib. Like it's adapted for this. And so my big question always comes down to, Magneto becomes a good guy over and over, but his ideology has never changed. And he will often say, Charles Xavier, I'm going to try it your way, but watch you be wrong. And he always goes back to this might makes right, because he has been proven in the Marvel Universe time and time again, Xavier's way doesn't work. And with the new reboot of Powers of X and House of X, Professor X just flat out says, I was wrong. We're going to do it your way from here on out.
Wow. That's a switch.
Xavier has tried over and over to do it the right way, and he's finally said, the only thing left to change is me.
Wow.
A new era of X-Men. So that's what I really like. He's got a backstory that justifies his mentality, and he walks the line of what we would and would not do. And every time he does it, it makes you ask that moral question. And I like to question him morally over and over again. Because there are times where I'm like, yeah, I would do that. I'm like, ooh, that was the line. A little too far. Destroying the Earth, probably not going to achieve your goal. Starting a mutant colony in Genosha, okay, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah. The thing about Magneto is it dances that line. Your description of him, it dances the line for me because absolute power will corrupt absolutely. And he does have incredible amounts of power. And having that point of view that they'll never understand, and this is how it has to be, it very easily and very quickly can make you a despot. It can make you a dictator. It can make you the villain of the piece. And I think we've seen that over and over again with Magneto.
And while I love Ian McKellen as Magneto, he will always be my Magneto. I do think Michael Fassbender's Magneto is more accurate to the comic because he tried to be good. He started a family, like he was doing everything, and something always goes wrong. Now, the movies made it a little too obvious every time.
Yeah.
But like for almost 10 years in the comics, he had his own nation. And yes, he was a king, but he was a benevolent king and very much only wanted to protect his people, to the point where him and Doctor Doom kind of became the same person.
Interesting.
But how are we going to make Magneto bad? We're going to create a complete and utter genocide of all of his nation. And then he tries to destroy the Earth.
Well, and here's the interesting thing about that. Okay, how many heroes have had that moment of everything precious stripped away from them, and they go on a killing bender, and then, oh, look, we need to redeem you. It's okay. You can come back to the fold. But then you have characters like Magneto, where it's like, nope, you're bad now. You're evil. Nobody's going to ever trust you again. It's like, okay, guys, you do see how this is hypocritical, right? Like, that bugs me. That is one thing I just hate about superhero stories. It's like there are some really hypocritical lines that these people draw.
And like, I like, Jean Grey going good and bad. She only went good and bad because it served, like, the plot created this situation. Magneto, I feel like he has rid that line so much that I'm currently catching up from 2016, and in that plot right now, he's just chillaxing on an island because no one trusts him because he tried to kill everyone last week, and he's like, I'll do what I have to earn your respect. And like, he's in the comic for 2 years doing nothing. He's basically the janitor, and he earns the respect slowly and becomes back into the fold of like being a front page character.
Yeah, but if you have somebody like Batman, I hate the hypocrisy of it though. Like, Scott Summers goes and does heinous shit, and it's like, oh, 2 issues later, he's old Scott Summers again. It's like, how does that work?
We
talked about this before the show.
His heinous stuff was poor writing.
That's a good point. Yeah.
He's always meant to be the Boy Scout, and later on, I'm actually
that's so boring. I got to be honest with you. Boy Scouts are so boring.
And this is why, as a kid, sorry, Nick Leonard, if you listen to this, you were wrong. Cyclops sucks. Because he's Superman.
Yeah.
But I'm at the spot where Wolverine and Cyclops finally go toe to toe, and Wolverine leaves the X-Men because Cyclops is like, Magneto was right. Let's do this. And Wolverine's like, whoa, 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 whoa. And now they've done a role reversal. And Wolverine's character is a little hard to believe, but at least Scott Summers, like, he's tired. He wants, and I love that believability that, oh, you do have a dark side. Like,
yeah, I need an edge. I think that's the other thing to me that makes a good hero. I need an edge. I need this person to have something that if you push them far enough, the cracks are going to start to show, or they're something's going to happen. And that's why I love Jessica Jones. And I do believe Wonder Woman has that as well. There are things that she cannot tolerate. She will not tolerate. And she'll put a sword through your head, that kind of thing. As much as she will, and the movie did this brilliantly. It's one of my all-time favorite iconic moments when she's standing with her shield and she's taking all the fire. Like she will do that too. She will stand, she will be the shield between the innocent and those that would harm the innocent. She'll definitely do that, but she'll also kick your ass.
I definitely like, which is funny because my second example is so not this. I like, for me, superheroes are a representation of what we either hope to be or what we fear we could be.
Mm.
And I like wondering, like, I always make the joke that if I had superpowers, let's be honest, I'd be a villain. Because, I'm a pretty upstanding, decent person, but put power in my hand, like, ooh, would that be a good thing? And it makes you ask that question. And
Yeah.
when you see these heroes get that power, you wonder, are they going to do it for good or for bad?
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that maybe.
Yeah.
Like, at no point did I think Jessica Jones was actually going to be the hero. When she did the right thing, I thought, oh, you're having an on day.
Well, but she had to be, and that's what I love. She had to be pushed to do the right thing.
Yep.
It wasn't like she went look. She actively tried to avoid being forced to do "quote unquote" the right thing, even while she was trying to help people as a PI. She was still like gruff and leave me the fuck alone, and
And
all
it's
of
funny because Jessica Jones takes a step up into being good, whereas Wonder Woman takes a step down into being
that.
bad.
Yes.
Like you said, if she sees wrongdoing against women, she just goes into a rage, and her goodness aside, we're gonna go open a can of whoop ass.
Yeah, exactly. I actually just changed something really quickly because I threw some heroes on our list just to kind of get my brain going, but I'm realizing I also the other person on my list I want to talk about is Squirrel Girl.
Okay, I'm curious to hear this one.
Because I'm realizing, like, and when you said, when we look at superheroes, it's the kind of person we want to be or like hope we would be, that kind of thing. Wonder Woman is definitely that for me. It's like she inspires me. I stand up a little straighter. But Squirrel Girl is who I probably would be. Like, honestly.
Oh my God, I actually have the same exact setup for mine.
Do you really?
So I'm with you on this.
So her power is on the surface very ridiculous. Squirrel powers? What the hell does that even mean? And that would be what I would end up getting, honestly. Like some kind of power where people are like, oh, that's nice. Like, okay. But she owns it. Like, so if any of you have Disney Plus, go watch Marvel Rising. Go watch all of those. And start with the first like 90-minute movie that they did. Because there is a point where America Chavez, I think, is the one that points out to her how ridiculous she is. And she's like, you know what? Yeah, I am ridiculous, but I'm also a hero and I'm also a friend and I'm going to go do something about this. And she never at any point is ashamed of who she is. And in fact, she wears it like a freaking mantle, a badge of honor. And because of that, she's able to be heroic. She finds a way to use her squirrel powers. Her and Tippy Toe are like some of the best superhero duos ever. And she inspires others. She looks at Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan, and she gives her, a pep talk because she believes in her. And part of the reason why she's so good at it is because she believes in herself, no matter what anybody says. And I love it. I absolutely love the underdog hero, the hero that you're like, you shouldn't work, but you totally do.
Like, I can 100% see a Squirrel Girl Captain America team up. Like, those personalities jive.
Yeah.
So I want to see a Squirrel Girl Magneto team up.
That would be off the hook. Like,
can
that
you
would be
imagine how much eye rolling would happen from both sides?
Yeah. Well, but and if you watch the Marvel Rising, and I think you would really like it, Remy. It's very cool, very superhero. America Chavez is that eye roller. She's like, oh my God. She's just like, please stop. And Squirrel Girl's like, no, she's just like, I'm gonna go for it. I adore her. I adore her. She's on my wall behind me. If anybody can see the picture, that's Squirrel Girl behind me. She's fantastic.
So Magneto is who I would most likely be. Who I think I would be Colossus from the X-Men.
That's an interesting choice. Now I'm curious.
So one of the things that I really like about superheroes is the juxtaposition of hard and soft, or strong and tender. Like, I like that weird, unusual combination. And probably the most relevant and most obvious one is Nightcrawler. He's a demon. His dad is basically the devil.
Mephistos?
And he's a priest. Like, I like religious Nightcrawler because it's just a weird juxtaposition that you wouldn't think. And Colossus is the same. Colossus is an artist. He comes over from Russia and he has the heart of an artist. He is extremely soft and he's tender. We're not going to talk about his creepy relationship with the 13-year-old girl, but she gets older. Let's just leave it there.
Is that Kitty Pryde?
Yeah. I've shipped them from the beginning, but as adulthood, you're like, ew, that was gross.
There were some creepy things in X-Men about that.
That's not their fault. That's the writer's fault.
Exactly.
And so he is like this massive dude who he goes out into paint nature, and he's really only joining the X-Men because he is trying to protect his family back in Russia. And then later on, Ileana Rasputin joins the New Mutants, who is like the most badass character ever. And he has to armor up, and he literally and metaphorically armors up. And so he, like, in his early Chris Claremont days, he would have like entire monologues with himself about how he didn't want to hurt people. He didn't want to be a dangerous person, but he was built to be that. And so, like the early images of him are him in Russia on the farm holding up the tractor because he was being helpful, but he was built to be a warrior. And so you get to know this character for a long time with that juxtaposition. But the really, really impacting one is when his little sister dies because she has basically the mutant equivalent of AIDS. And Uncanny X-Men issue 302 is still like the most tragic issue of all time. But later on, he finds out that he can cure this disease that killed his sister, but it will kill him. And people are fighting with him to keep him from doing it, but it's the greater good. And it's the first time that his ability will let him do something good without being destructive.
Oh my God.
And I love heroes that have that juxtaposition, not necessarily with their powers versus their personality, but his is very much his powers run opposite of his personality. So I really love that.
The duality. Absolutely. That is a fascinating, it's such rich character building. I love that even when we're not talking about superheroes. Some of my favorite books have characters where they're a big ball of conflict with themselves. I love it.
I like hearing how they work through that conflict because it gives me a chance to self-analyze and go along for my own journey. So, I make the joke that I grew up, X-Men taught me morals, and well, they weirdly did. And, you have really good role models out of it because they had these conflicts on page that were both internal and external. And he will always be my big teddy bear. So
I love that. I think that's a great place to end the conversation because I honestly want to hear from other people. Like the question of the week, I've got a suggestion. Like, I think what we should say is, what's the superhero that you would want to be? And who's the superhero that you would likely be?
Oh, good one.
Because you and I, that's kind of where you and I both went without really knowing the other person was going to do it. So I think that's a good question.
Planned.
It wasn't planned, no.
Yeah, so definitely hit us up on that because we're gonna wrap up there. And next week we're gonna be talking about what makes a good villain. And weirdly enough, I'm safe to say that almost this entire conversation could also apply to villains.
It could. Yeah.
But weirdly, my villains, I have some pretty specific views on my villains.
I'm gonna have to give this some thought because I'm not as attached to a particular villain as I am to particular heroes. So this is going to be interesting for me.
Oh, some of the reasons I like some of my heroes, like, almost make you feel gross that's why you're attracted to them.
Oh yeah, and now that I think about it, my dark side might really come out to play next week because I have a pretty big dark side.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure. So there will be group therapy after this event. So.
But if you want to see what we're talking about, you should tune in next week and answer the question of the week because we really want to know who's the hero that you would want to be and who's the hero you probably would be.
Okay, that's a wrap, guys. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody. To stay up to date with the Geekorama podcast, you can watch our videos on YouTube or subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. And if you enjoyed the show, leave us a review or hit the thumbs up button. New episodes are released on Thursdays for podcast listeners and YouTube fans.